The Borneo Blackwater swamp forest breathes in warm shadow tonight, and we drift with it through tea-dark water and soft peat under the trees. Settle in and let the journey stay unhurried. The air is damp against your skin, carrying the faint green smell of leaves, wet bark, and water that has been resting in the forest for a very long time. You can picture the surface first, almost still beneath the low branches, with reflections trembling where the swamp forest opens into a narrow channel. The water is not black because it is empty, but because it is full of old forest memory, stained by leaves, roots, and peat. Here in the Borneo Blackwater swamp forest, even the light seems to slow down before it touches anything. We move gently between trees that rise from the wet ground on buttressed roots, their bases wide and folded like old wooden sails. Beneath them, the peat holds rainwater like a quiet sponge, dark and soft and deep in places. Each step, if you imagine stepping at all, would be cushioned by moss, leaf litter, and earth made from centuries of fallen green life. The water around us is warm near the surface, but shaded, and it carries very little mineral taste. It is acidic, brown with tannins, and poor in nutrients by ordinary measures, yet it has its own patient richness. You begin to sense that this place is not barren, only subtle, asking its creatures to live slowly and carefully. Above you, the canopy lets down pieces of daylight in broken green strands. They fall onto the black water and scatter into copper, amber, and a dim reddish glow. You hear insects more than distance, a thin weaving sound, while somewhere a bird gives a soft call and then leaves the forest quiet again. We keep drifting inward, and the Borneo Blackwater swamp forest gathers closer around us, not closing us in, but holding the air still. The trunks stand in shallow water, some silver, some brown, some darkened almost black by wetness. Around their roots, small fish move like shadows that have learned to breathe. Many of these fish are small because the swamp asks for smallness. In narrow pools and flooded root tangles, tiny rasparas, licorice gouramis, and bettas slip through water the color of strong tea. Their bodies catch the dim light briefly, with a glint of blue, red, or bronze, and then they become part of the darkness again. You might notice how quietly they live. There is no rush in their movements, only little turns, pauses, and patient searching among fallen leaves. Some breathe at the surface in their own careful way, taking air when oxygen in the warm black water runs low, as if the forest has taught them to sip from two worlds. The science of this water is gentle but exact. Rain falls through the canopy, drains through layers of peat, and gathers the brown compounds released by decaying leaves and wood. Those tannins tint the channels, soften the light, and create a world where visibility is close, intimate, and calm. As we float beside the roots, you can feel how the forest floor is not solid in the ordinary sense. It is built from plant remains that never fully broke down, because water kept air away and slowed the work of decay. Year after year, leaf after leaf, the swamp made a dark archive beneath itself. In that peat, the past is not gone. It is compressed, soaked, and held in place. When you breathe slowly, you can imagine each layer below us as an older season of rain, fruit, blossom, and fallen branch, all folded into the soft ground. The trees above this peat have learned to stand with patience. Their roots spread wide, lifting and flaring, because the soil is wet and low in nutrients. They do not hurry upward in a simple way, but arrange themselves carefully in a place where water and earth are always negotiating. We pass beneath pandan leaves that arch like long green ribbons, and under palms whose fronds comb the humid air. Ferns gather where there is enough light. Vines cross from trunk to trunk, and the whole forest seems stitched together by growth that has taken its time. If you listen closely, you may hear water touching wood in small repeating notes. A bubble rises from beneath the peat. A leaf lands softly and begins its long return into the dark. Nothing is wasted here, though almost everything disappears from sight. And as we drift further along the channel, the trees grow denser, and the living things of the Borneo Blackwater swamp forest begin to reveal themselves in slower layers. A dragonfly rests on a twig above the water, its wings held out like clear panes. Its body is slim and bright, but even its brightness feels muted by the shade. You watch it lift, hover, and settle again, making almost no sound. Beneath it, mosquito larvae and small aquatic insects move in the shallow margins, part of a delicate web that feeds fish, frogs, and birds. The swamp is quiet, but it is never still in the way stone is still. On a low leaf, a frog sits with its body folded into itself. Its skin shines with moisture, patterned to match bark, leaf shadow, and the damp brown floor. When it calls, the sound is not loud, only rounded and patient, spreading through the wet air like a ripple. Some frogs breed in small pools left between roots, or in rainwater held by plants. Some cling to leaves above the water, trusting the humid air to keep them from drying. You can imagine their nights as a series of tiny movements, from leaf to stem to pooled darkness. The Borneo Blackwater swamp forest holds many lives that depend on these small pockets of water. A depression beside a root can become a nursery. A fallen leaf can become shelter. A hollow in a tree can hold enough rain for an insect, a tadpole, or a quiet waiting life. The air smells earthy now, with a slight sourness from peat and a sweetness from flowers hidden somewhere high above us. You may not see the blossoms at first, but you feel their presence in the heavy warmth. The forest lets fragrance travel slowly, like another kind of current. Birds move through the canopy in brief, soft crossings. A hornbill may pass overhead with deep wing beats, not hurried, only purposeful, its shape large against a pale opening of sky. Smaller birds slip after insects among the leaves, their calls falling and fading before they reach the water. We are not here to chase them. We simply notice what the forest allows us to notice. The Borneo Blackwater swamp forest is generous in a quiet way, giving glimpses instead of displays, and asking the eye to rest before it understands. Somewhere higher in the trees, a fruit ripens in the humidity. It may feed a hornbill, a squirrel, a macaque, or an orangutan moving slowly through the canopy. In this flooded forest, fruit is more than sweetness, because it carries seeds through the living bodies that wander above the water. You can picture an orangutan here not as a spectacle, but as a reddish shape among leaves, deliberate and almost silent. Its long arms test branches with care. Its body moves with the pace of someone who knows the architecture of trees better than any path on the ground. The swamp forest gives orangutans fruit, young leaves, bark, insects, and shelter, though everything is spread unevenly through time. Some days the canopy is rich, other days it asks for patience. You feel that patience in the way the whole forest holds itself. The peat below us, poor in minerals, shapes the lives above it. Trees grow with strategies for scarcity, animals travel to follow fruiting cycles, and even the smallest fish make do with water that is acidic and low in oxygen. Nothing here is careless, yet nothing feels strained. Below this, the channel narrows, and we move into a quieter part of the Borneo Blackwater swamp forest, where the light has less room to enter. The water beside us becomes smoother, reflecting roots, leaves, and the pale underside of branches. When a fish turns below the surface, the whole reflection loosens and returns. Here you begin to notice the leaf litter underwater. It lies in layers, brown, red, and almost black, softening into shapes that are no longer exactly leaves. Small shrimp and insect larvae search among them. Snails graze in the dimness where surfaces hold a thin film of life. The black water may seem empty from above, because its darkness hides what it carries. But when you let your eyes adjust, you see motion in fragments. A flicker near a root, a delicate fin, a pale mouth touching the surface and vanishing. Many fish in these waters are adapted to close spaces and soft chemistry. Some are labyrinth fish, able to breathe air directly when the water holds little oxygen. Some make nests of bubbles beneath leaves, guarding tiny eggs in a place where even parenthood feels quiet and suspended. You can imagine a male betta beneath a floating leaf, tending a little raft of bubbles. Each bubble glows faintly with reflected brown light. The fish moves with careful pulses, rising, turning, and settling under the shelter of the forest's fallen skin. The water tastes of leaves in the imagination, though we do not drink it. It smells like rain that has passed through wood. It feels warm, close, and silky, with fine particles drifting through it like dust in a sunbeam. Except the sunbeam here is dim and amber. Along the banks, roots knit the peat together. They slow the water, trap leaves, and create sheltered chambers where young fish and insects can hide. This is how the swamp builds habitat from slowness, letting complexity gather wherever the current loses strength. When rain comes, it does not simply run away. It spreads, seeps, fills, and lingers. The Borneo Blackwater swamp forest is shaped by that lingering, by water that stays long enough to become colored, softened, and woven into every root. You may feel your own breathing follow that pattern. In, and then a pause. Out, and then another pause. The forest teaches a rhythm without asking, because everything here is already breathing in long cycles of rain, growth, falling leaves, and quiet return. A turtle may rest beneath a submerged branch, its shell dark with shadow. It rises when it needs air, touching the surface with almost no disturbance. Then it sinks again into the brown water, as if the swamp has opened and closed gently around it. In the distance, a proboscis monkey may move through riverside trees, though here we keep our attention soft. Its pale belly and long limbs appear between leaves, then vanish behind another screen of green. The forest offers shapes, and then takes them back. And as we move deeper into the flooded woodland, the Borneo Blackwater swamp forest becomes less like a place we pass through, and more like a slow presence around us. The banks are low and blurred. Water and land trade places under the roots, until the idea of a path becomes very gentle. The trees here are living with wet feet. Some endure weeks or months of flooding, while others stand on slightly raised mounds of peat and roots. A few fallen trunks bridge dark pools, and moss grows along them where the air remains damp. You can feel the humidity settle on your face like a warm veil. It softens every edge. Even sound feels absorbed, so that insect calls, bird notes, and distant branch movements arrive rounded, with no sharpness left in them. The canopy above filters the daylight into green shadow. When clouds pass over the lowland sky, the forest darkens without drama. The Blackwater answers by becoming deeper in color, more reflective, and more like polished wood. In this layer, plants must solve the quiet problem of hunger. Peat swamp soils can be acidic and low in available nutrients, so roots spread widely near the surface. Some plants form partnerships with fungi, while others rely on careful recycling of leaf litter and the slow release of stored minerals. Pitcher plants may grow where the forest opens, their cups holding rainwater and small drowned insects. They are not fierce in this telling, only patient. Their leaves have become vessels, and inside those vessels, tiny worlds gather under the soft heat. You might lean close in your mind and see a pitcher filled with dark rain. A few specks drift inside. The rim shines faintly, and the cup hangs among leaves like a small green lantern that has chosen stillness instead of flame. Around such plants, ants, flies, and beetles move through the understory. Some insects feed on nectar, some on leaves, some on decaying wood, and many become food in turn. The swamp forest is full of exchanges so small that they feel almost like whispers. The Borneo Blackwater swamp forest is not a simple backdrop for animals. It is the slow maker of their possibilities. Its acidity shapes the fish, its flood pulses shape the roots, and its fruiting trees shape the movements of birds and mammals above us. A squirrel runs along a branch with quick softness, then stops and holds still. A gecko rests flat against bark, its body cooled by shade and damp air. Somewhere near the waterline, a crab works among the roots, picking through the edible fragments left by the forest. These lives do not announce themselves all at once. You notice them the way you notice stars after standing outside for a while. First one, then another. Then the whole darkness becomes less empty than it seemed. We go on slowly, and the next layer begins where the channel widens into a quiet pool of the Borneo Blackwater swamp forest. The surface here is almost mirror flat, broken only by drifting leaves and the rings made by small mouths feeding from below. A fallen branch lies half submerged, darkened by water until it seems made of the same substance as the pool itself. This is a place of edges. Air touches water, roots touch peat, light touches shade and becomes brown. You can rest your attention on those edges, where many small creatures spend their lives. At the surface, insects skate lightly, dimpling the water without sinking. Beneath them, fish rise and take tiny prey, leaving only a faint circle that widens and disappears. Above them, spiders hold silk among the leaves, waiting without tension. The black water itself protects some of this life by being difficult for outsiders. Its low pH, low mineral content, and low oxygen can limit many species that might thrive elsewhere, but the creatures that belong here are finely matched to it, as though the water has shaped them in a long, quiet conversation. Some fish have dark bodies that vanish against the tea-colored depth. Others carry small flashes of color used in close-range signaling, where sight does not travel far. A mate may be only a few body lengths away, and a little brightness can be enough. You may picture that tiny glow, not like ocean bioluminescence, but like color saved for the dimness. A blue edge on a fin, a red line on a small body, a silver eye catching the little light that enters under the leaves. In the forest above, calls travel in layers. A soft bird note falls from high branches, insects pulse from the lower vegetation, frogs answer from hidden wet places, and the water receives it all, holding the sound without echo. When the rain begins, if we imagine it beginning gently, it first touches the canopy as a hush. Then it reaches the lower leaves in scattered drops. At last, it stipples the black water, making thousands of tiny rings that overlap and fade. Rain is one of the great quiet forces here. It feeds the swamp, raises the pools, rinses leaves, and carries new tannins into the channels. In Borneo's lowland peat forests, water is both road and route, both mirror and memory. You feel the rain without coldness, because the air remains warm. It beads on leaves, darkens bark, and releases a deeper smell from the peat. The whole forest seems to exhale, not loudly, but with the broad relief of a place returning to itself. As the pool fills, fish move into newly flooded margins. They enter places that were damp ground before, weaving among grasses, roots, and fallen leaves. For a little while, the forest floor becomes water, and the water becomes forest. That is one of the gentle secrets of this ecosystem. Its boundaries shift. A dry hollow can become a nursery, a root tangle can become a shelter, and a shaded path of water can open where yesterday there was only leaf litter. And as the rain softens into mist, we move onward through the Borneo Blackwater swamp forest, following a channel that bends under low branches. The light is dimmer now, though not gone. It arrives in bronze patches and pale green reflections, each one trembling when a drop falls from above. You may sense larger animals by traces rather than clear views. A branch sways after something has passed. A fruit shell rests near the water. Mud holds the softened print of a foot, already filling with brown water. The forest is good at hiding its own abundance. It does not place everything in the open. It lets life move behind leaves, under roots, inside hollows, and along paths known mostly by scent, memory, and repetition. For mammals here, the swamp is a layered home. Orangutans use the canopy. Macaques and proboscis monkeys follow riverside trees. Civets travel at night, and small rodents search among fruit and seeds. Each one reads the forest differently, but each one belongs to its slow design. You are not separate from the listening now. Your attention has become part of the dusk under the trees. When a leaf shifts, you notice. When the water wrinkles, you wait. When nothing happens, you let the nothing widen. In the Borneo Blackwater swamp forest, nighttime does not arrive sharply. It gathers. The greens become deeper. The water turns from brown to almost black, and the spaces between trunks fill with soft shadow. Frogs grow more confident after sunset. Their calls overlap from puddles, roots, and low branches, forming a loose, damp music. It is not a performance, only the forest continuing its ordinary life, while the last light thins away. Insects begin new routes through the air. Moths come to pale flowers. Beetles work under bark. Ants follow chemical trails along branches, carrying pieces of leaf, seed, or insect through a world that smells richer than it looks. A slow breeze may pass above the canopy, though below it we feel only the faintest stirring. The swamp keeps its lower air close. Heat, scent, moisture, and the green breath of plants settle together, making the night feel deep before it is fully dark. Some flowers open more completely in evening, offering nectar to moths and other night visitors. Their scent moves softly through the wet air. You may not see them, but you can imagine their whiteness somewhere above the Blackwater, small and calm among leaves. Bats begin to feed in the open places, using sound beyond our hearing to map the air. They pass quickly, but not harshly, taking insects from the dusk. Their movements are part of the forest's gentler mathematics, where hunger and abundance balance without needing to be loud. Below this night layer, the water remains warm and dark, and the fish continue their careful lives. Some rest among leaves, some hunt tiny prey, some rise now and then to breathe from the surface, leaving a small sound like a fingertip touching silk. We drift with them a little longer, and the Borneo Blackwater swamp forest settles into its deepest evening quiet. The sky is no longer visible, except as a faint pale seam between high branches. The water below reflects almost nothing now, and yet it feels full, as though the darkness has become another kind of shelter. You can think of the peat beneath us again, thick and saturated, holding not only water but carbon from old forests. It formed because growth was faster than decay in this wet, air-poor ground. The forest learned to store time under itself. That thought can feel strangely restful. Not everything has to move quickly into the open. Some things can be held, layer by layer, in darkness, doing their work without display. The creatures here understand hiddenness. A fish under a leaf, a frog on bark, a civet on a night branch, a seed beneath peat dark litter. Each one has its quiet place. The swamp does not demand brightness from them. You may feel your body becoming heavier in the best way, as if your bed has become soft peat, and your breath has become slow water. The forest around us does not ask you to stay alert. It only offers details, one at a time, and lets them pass. The Blackwater carries a fallen petal past a root. It turns once, catches on a twig, then loosens and moves on. Around it, tiny surface rings appear and fade, until even movement feels like rest. The petal moves into a narrow side channel, and we let our attention follow it, not with purpose, but with the same drifting patience. The Borneo Blackwater swamp forest opens in small ways here, through a corridor of roots and leaning saplings. You can feel the air cooling only slightly as night gathers, though the damp warmth remains close to your skin. The smell of peat rises more deeply now, dark, earthy, and soft, like rain resting in old wood. Around the channel, the flooded ground is covered with fallen leaves in many stages of return. Some still hold their shape, veined and curled at the edges, while others have become thin brown ghosts. You notice how gently the water accepts them, drawing color from them over time. This is how the Blackwater keeps becoming itself, not from one sudden change, but from countless small leavings of the forest. We are floating through a place made by patience. A small fish turns beneath a leaf, and for a moment its side catches the last faint light. It is no brighter than a thought. Then it slips back under the cover of roots, where the water is shadowed and still. You can imagine its whole life unfolding within a few quiet meters, among stems, leaf litter, and little spaces of shelter. In the Borneo Blackwater swamp forest, vastness often hides inside smallness. The peat below us is deeper than it looks from the surface. It may have built upward over thousands of wet seasons, with leaves, trunks, roots, pollen, and seeds settling into waterlogged ground. Because oxygen enters so slowly, decay is delayed, and the forest keeps part of itself beneath its own feet. When you picture it, you can picture a dark, saturated library, written not in words, but in layers. We drift above that quiet archive without disturbing it. Near the bank, a cluster of roots makes a low tangled wall. The water slips through it slowly, filtered by wood, fibers, and fallen plant matter. Tiny invertebrates move there, nearly invisible unless you wait long enough. You may see one pale body fold and unfold under the surface, or a speck crawl along a soaked leaf. These lives are not background to the swamp, they are part of its breathing. A frog calls again from somewhere close, though the leaves hide it from us. The sound is round and moist, shaped by the air between the trees. Another answers farther away, and then the night has a gentle pattern to it. We do not need to know every species by name to feel how they belong here. Still, the science is there beneath the softness, in the way each call fits a breeding place, a season, a body size, a small territory of water and leaf. The Borneo Blackwater swamp forest has many such hidden arrangements. A hollow tree may shelter an insect colony, a roosting bat, or a pool of rainwater. A fallen branch can feed fungi, beetles, and termites, while also making a bridge for ants and lizards. The more slowly you look, the more the forest stops being a wall of green and becomes a woven fabric. Your attention loosens, and the threads begin to show. We move past a trunk with pale fungi growing along its shaded side. They spread like small shelves, quiet and patient, breaking down wood that has already given years to leaves and shade. In a dry forest, fallen wood might crack and bleach in sunlight, but here it darkens, softens, and becomes part of the damp ground. The smell around it is rich but gentle. It is the smell of return, held in warm air. Termites may be working inside the softened wood, unseen but constant. They make passages through cellulose, helped by hidden microbes that turn tough plant material into usable food. Their work frees nutrients in a place where nutrients are scarce, and so even decay becomes a kind of generosity. You can imagine the trunk as a slow feast, not dramatic, not hurried, feeding small lives under bark while rain taps above them. The swamp wastes nothing. Above us, the canopy is almost entirely dark now. Only a dim grayness marks the high openings where sky remains between leaves. You may hear a night bird call once, then fall silent. Its voice seems to hang for a moment in the humid air before dissolving into the insect sound. The Borneo Blackwater swamp forest does not become empty at night. It simply turns its living face toward quieter senses. Scent matters more after dark. Flowers advertise themselves to moths. Civets follow fruit by smell, and many animals read paths in traces too subtle for us. You can feel that change in the story of the forest as sight softens and the nose begins to imagine more. Wet bark, peat, leaf mold, faint blossom, and standing water gather together. The darkness is not blank. It is layered. A civet may move along a branch over the channel, light-footed and almost soundless. It searches for fruit, insects, and small things hidden among leaves, using the night as a shelter rather than a stage. If we see it at all, it is only as a long shape crossing a gap, with eyes briefly reflecting a soft glimmer. Then it is gone into foliage. The forest keeps the encounter brief and calm. Fruiting trees make invisible paths through this swamp. When one tree ripens, animals come from different directions, drawn by scent, habit, and memory. Birds feed and carry seeds away. Mammals chew pulp and let seeds fall elsewhere, sometimes far from the parent trunk. In the Borneo Blackwater swamp forest, the next generation of trees often begins with movement through another creature's body, a quiet partnership carried through shade. You can imagine a seed resting in wet leaf litter, dark and smooth after the fruit around it is gone. It may wait through rain, heat, and flooding before it opens. Its first root must find purchase in peat that is soft, acidic, and often low in minerals. Its first leaves must rise toward whatever light can pass through the canopy. Nothing about this is hurried. Growth here is a slow agreement with place. The channel bends, and the current nearly disappears. We are in water that feels more like a held breath than a river. Floating leaves gather against roots, then part gently as more rainwater enters from somewhere behind us. Your body can feel that stillness as rest. There is no reason to press forward. In the Borneo Blackwater swamp forest, even direction feels optional. Under the water, chemical conditions vary from one pocket to another. A shaded hollow packed with leaves may hold less oxygen than a clearer, gently moving channel. A pool warmed by daylight may become different again by afternoon. Small fish and aquatic insects read these differences with their bodies, choosing where to rest, feed, or breed. We call it chemistry, but to them it is simply the texture of home. Some fish rise to the surface because the water below is poor in oxygen. They take air with delicate precision, then sink again among the roots. That little act, repeated through generations, has shaped bodies and behaviors in many swamp fishes. You can picture the surface as a second ceiling, a boundary they cross only for a breath. The sound is barely a sound, just the faintest kiss of water. In pools beneath overhanging leaves, labyrinth fish build bubble nests. The bubbles cling together, protected by the film of the water and the shelter above. Eggs may be placed there, and a parent may tend them, collecting any that fall and returning them with care. This is a tender detail in a dark place. It reminds you that the swamp's hidden lives are not vague. They are exact, intimate, and beautifully adapted. The Borneo Blackwater swamp forest is often described by its darkness, but the darkness is only the beginning of seeing it. It teaches close vision. Instead of sweeping views, it offers inches of root, a single fin, a line of ants, a damp flower, a patch of fungi. You do not take it in all at once. You let one detail become enough, and then another detail arrives. We pass beneath leaves broad enough to hold beads of water along their veins. Each bead reflects a tiny, upside-down version of the forest. When one falls, it touches the black water and becomes a ring. The ring expands until it meets a root, a leaf, or another ring, and then it disappears without needing to be remembered. This kind of quiet repetition is one of the swamp's rhythms. Farther in, the trees stand closer, and some rise on stilted roots above flooded hollows. Their lower trunks are darkened by old water lines, showing how the swamp rises and falls through seasons. During wetter months, fish may move where insects once walked. During drier times, the water withdraws into channels and pools, leaving damp peat and the smell of exposed leaf litter. You can feel the forest stretching and settling with each change. Seasonal flooding is not an interruption here. It is one of the main ways the Borneo Blackwater swamp forest organizes life. Fish spread into new feeding grounds. Frogs find breeding places. Seeds are carried or stranded, and roots receive water differently. The forest does not resist this shifting. It has been shaped by it, just as your breathing is shaped by the quiet rise and fall of your chest. In the understory, palms and saplings wait for openings in the canopy. Some may spend years in subdued light, growing slowly, conserving energy, ready to respond if a branch falls above them. You can imagine them as patient listeners. They do not complain about shade. They become skilled at living with it, holding green leaves where a little light can touch them. In this place, waiting is a form of strength. A fallen tree creates one of those openings. Its absence lets a pale shaft of moonlight or cloud-filtered night brightness reach the water. New plants gather there over time, drawn by the extra light. Ferns, seedlings, vines, and shrubs begin a soft competition, not with noise, but with leaves angled toward the opening. The gap becomes a small laboratory of renewal, while the fallen trunk below becomes food. We drift near such a place now, where the darkness is slightly thinner. You can see the water's brown surface, the ragged edge of leaves, the shine on wet bark. A moth crosses the opening and vanishes against a trunk. Somewhere beneath the roots, a fish turns again. Everything feels close enough to touch, though we keep our presence light and only listen. The Borneo Blackwater swamp forest is sometimes quiet because its richness is hidden from distant views. Nutrients move through tight loops. Fallen leaves feed microbes. Microbes feed small invertebrates. Invertebrates feed fish and frogs, and larger animals follow those smaller lives through the trees and water. Energy is passed along carefully. as though the forest knows that nothing should be spent without purpose. You may feel comfort in that carefulness. The swamp does not need to be bright to be full. It does not need open horizons to be immense. Its depth is not like a canyon or sea trench, but like a thought that keeps unfolding inward, root by root and pool by pool. We are learning its vastness from the inside. A small splash sounds near the bank, but it is soft enough not to startle. Perhaps a fish took an insect from the surface, or a frog slipped into water. The rings move outward and touch the reflected trunks. Then the surface repairs itself, and the forest returns to its long dark mirror. You can let that repairing surface enter your breathing, smoothing one thought after another. As we continue, the night insects become more even in their sound. Their calls blend into a continuous veil, fine and steady. It is not silence, but it has the same soothing effect as silence, because nothing in it asks for alarm. The Borneo Blackwater swamp forest holds that sound under the canopy, letting it settle over the water like mist. Your attention can rest inside it without needing to follow every note. Somewhere in the upper branches, an orangutan may have built a nest for the night. The nest is a woven platform of bent branches and leaves, made with practiced hands high above the wet ground. It is a simple shelter, but also a sign of intelligence shaped by trees. You can imagine the body resting there, heavy and warm among leaves, while the black water below reflects nothing but darkness. Orangutans in these swamp forests often travel where fruiting trees draw them, using memory and patience across large home ranges. They are slow not because they are idle, but because slowness suits a life in branches. Each movement is tested, each handhold matters. In the Borneo Blackwater swamp forest, such careful movement belongs to the same calm logic as roots spreading through peat. Below the sleeping canopy, nocturnal insects continue their work. Some visit flowers, some feed on sap, some break down dead matter or become food for bats, frogs, and spiders. You might see a beetle shine like a tiny polished seed on a wet leaf, then vanish underneath it. The smallest lives often carry the strongest sense of abundance because they are everywhere once you begin to notice. A spider waits between two leaves with a web so fine it appears only when water touches it. Droplets gather along the silk, making a string of tiny lights in the dimness. The spider remains still. Waiting here is not emptiness, but a way of belonging. The forest is full of patient hunters, patient growers, patient decomposers, and patient sleepers, all held in the same hush. The channel deepens slightly, though still gently, and the banks become more root-bound. A tree has fallen across the water ahead, its branches making a low arch. We pass beneath it in imagination, close enough to smell the wet wood. Fungi and mosses soften its surface, and insects have opened fine galleries beneath the bark. Even fallen, it is not finished. It has simply changed roles. In a blackwater swamp, dead wood can remain saturated for long periods, changing slowly. It shelters fish beneath its submerged limbs, supports fungi above the surface, and feeds invertebrates that help recycle its strength. You can think of death here as a gradual loosening, not an ending with sharp edges. The forest does not throw anything away. It receives, transforms, and holds. The Borneo Blackwater swamp forest also holds sound differently from open land. Dense leaves, water surfaces, and soft peat absorb and scatter noise. A call may seem close when it is far, or far when it is just behind a curtain of foliage. You do not need to locate everything. It is enough to feel surrounded by life that keeps its own distances. A faint breeze reaches us now, carrying cooler air from a wider channel. The water stirs, and the reflections of trunks bend into slow, wavering lines. Leaves rub lightly above, not in a rush, but like fabric shifting in sleep. You can feel the whole forest making a small adjustment around us. It settles again, and we settle with it. Where the channel opens, floating plants gather in sheltered corners. Their roots hang below them in fine threads, making shade and shelter for fry and small invertebrates. A tiny fish can disappear among those roots as easily as a bird disappears into leaves. The floating plants move when water moves, and so their little habitats drift within the larger stillness. You might imagine the fry there, newly small in a world of large roots and broad leaves. They feed on tiny organisms, avoid open water, and learn the shapes of shelter by instinct. Their lives are measured in fine movements, minute adjustments, and the sheltering brownness of the water. The swamp gives them concealment, and concealment gives them time. The color of Blackwater is one of its defining gifts. Tannins and humic substances from decaying plant material absorb and filter light, turning clear rainwater into something like dark tea. This color shades the aquatic world and changes how plants, fish, insects, and predators interact. For us as listeners, it also gives the journey a gentle inward feeling. We cannot see too far, and so we rest in what is near. Nearness is soothing in this forest. A single root curve can hold your attention. A patch of ripples can become a whole scene. A small fish beneath a leaf can feel as complete as any wide landscape. The Borneo Blackwater Swamp Forest teaches that intimacy and vastness can live together, that a place may be enormous because its details are endless. We drift beside a bank where the peat has been undercut by water, revealing dark layers just above the surface. Fine roots hang down like threads. Some are pale and new, others dark and older, weaving through the soil that is not quite soil in the usual sense. You can sense how the forest holds itself together through these living threads, above a foundation that is wet, soft, and ancient. Peat forms slowly, and its slowness matters. In a swamp like this, plant growth adds organic matter, while waterlogging slows its breakdown. The result is a deep, carbon-rich ground that shapes hydrology, chemistry, vegetation, and animal life. These facts can sound technical, yet in the forest they feel simple. Leaves fall, water stays, air is limited, and time becomes thick. A root dips into the channel and disappears beneath the surface. Around it, sediment has gathered in a small crescent. Tiny bubbles cling to the submerged bark, then release and rise. They open at the surface without drama. You can follow one bubble upward in your mind, from the dark peat below to the dark air above, both worlds meeting at the waterline. The waterline is busy, though quietly. Insects land there, fish feed there, frogs pass through it, roots cross it, leaves float on it. It is not a border so much as a soft exchange, and we remain near it as if we are being taught how much life happens between categories. The Borneo Blackwater Swamp Forest is full of such in-between places. It is forest and wetland, soil and water, land path and fish path, shade and reflection. Creatures here use those mixtures without naming them. They follow moisture, scent, light, oxygen, and food, moving through the world as it is, not as a map would simplify it. In the distance, the channel may connect to a larger Blackwater river. During high water, that river can spread into the forest, carrying fish, organic matter, and dissolved compounds through a wider flooded plain. During lower water, it draws back into its banks, leaving pools to warm and darken under leaves. The forest breathes with that expansion and retreat, and you can feel your own body understand it. A broad leaf falls from above and lands upside down on the water. Its underside is pale, almost silver in the faint light. Slowly, water gathers on it until one edge sinks. The leaf tips fills and settles beneath the surface, beginning the long transformation into food, stain, shelter, and soil. Nothing about this moment is grand. That is why it feels true. As the leaf sinks, small fish approach and then scatter. They may return later to search along its edges. Microbes will begin their quiet work, softening tissues and making nutrients available to other lives. In the Borneo Blackwater Swamp Forest, the fall of a single leaf matters because leaves are the main currency of the place. They feed the dark water that shelters so much else. You may notice how the forest's abundance is vertical. Above, fruit, flowers, leaves, nests, and branches form a high world of movement. At the surface, insects, fish, frogs, and reflections gather in a thin shining layer. Below, leaf litter, roots, peat, and hidden water hold older processes. We drift in the middle, listening upward and downward at once. This vertical layering creates many kinds of quiet habitat. A lizard may live on bark, a frog on leaves, a fish among roots, a crab near the bank, and a fungus inside fallen wood. Each one knows a different version of the same forest. When we say Borneo Blackwater Swamp Forest, we are speaking of all those versions together, folded into one deep, humid place. The smell changes again, near a stand of flowering shrubs. It becomes faintly sweet, almost creamy, but still mixed with wet earth. Night insects find the flowers more precisely than our eyes can. Their bodies brush pollen from one bloom to another, continuing an old agreement between plant and visitor. You can imagine the flowers open in darkness, trusting scent more than color. Pollination in such forests is often a quiet network of specialized timings and relationships. Some flowers open at night for moths or bats, while others rely on bees, beetles, or flies by day. The swamp's wetness, shade, and seasonality influence when plants bloom and who visits them. Even beauty here is practical. But practicality does not remove wonder. It gives wonder a body. A gecko shifts on the trunk beside us, its toes holding the wet bark with ease. Its eyes seem large in the dimness, though it remains nearly motionless. Perhaps it waits for a small insect. Perhaps it is only adjusting its place in the night. We do not disturb it. The forest's still creatures invite stillness from us. Water continues to thread between the roots. In places, it is only ankle deep. In others, it drops into darker pools where branches vanish. The bottom may be soft peat, leaf litter, and fine sediment, all stirred easily if touched. But we are not walking now. We are drifting, and the water remains clear in its own brown way, undisturbed around us. Clarity here does not mean transparency. It means belonging to the conditions of the place. The Blackwater is clear enough for the life that has learned it, scented enough for chemical messages, shaded enough for concealment, and soft enough to hold a special community. When you stop expecting it to behave like clear stream water, it becomes understandable and peaceful. The Borneo Blackwater Swamp Forest has its own light scale. Daylight becomes green shade, then amber water, then brown reflection, then black night, then the pale suggestion of morning mist. We are deep in the darker part of that scale now, where shape matters more than color. A trunk is a vertical darkness, a root is a curve, a leaf is a held shadow, with a wet edge. Some animals make use of reflection. Insects may mistake, test, or respond to water surfaces. Fish watch for silhouettes above them. Frogs choose calling sites where sound and shelter meet. Every surface in the forest is part of someone else's perception. You and I, drifting quietly, become aware of how many ways there are to sense. A soft rustle moves across the bank and then stops. It may be a small mammal searching among fallen fruit. It may be a lizard shifting through leaves. The source remains hidden, and that hiddenness feels appropriate. The swamp lets us know that life is near without turning every life into an object to examine. Some presences are meant to remain partial. The forest floor, where it rises above the water, is uneven with roots and mounds. Seeds lodge in those higher places. Ferns take hold where moisture remains but flooding is less constant. Ants build roots over ridges of wood and peat. To a small creature, each mound is a hill, each puddle a lake, each root a bridge across a darkened world. We drift past a place where roots descend from a leaning tree into the water like many fingers. Their tips disappear into blackness. Around them, the water smells especially tannic, like soaked leaves and old rain. You can feel the temperature steady around us, warm but shaded, the kind of warmth that makes movement optional and rest natural. The Borneo Blackwater Swamp Forest is not silent, but its sounds often have soft edges. Drips, wing beats, insect pulses, fish touches, leaf shifts, distant calls, all blend into a low, wet hush. There is no need for the mind to separate every strand. It can simply receive the whole fabric, and in receiving it, begin to loosen. Above, the sleeping nests of birds are hidden in foliage. Some birds choose dense branches for cover, others rest in cavities or tangles. By day, they may feed on fruit, nectar, insects, or fish from the water's edge. But now, most have folded themselves into the night. Their quiet is part of the swamp's nocturnal balance, allowing other lives to come forward. You may picture morning already stored in them, though it has not arrived. The first calls will come later, when the canopy begins to pale and insects shift again. But for now, the Borneo Blackwater swamp forest holds them in darkness, and we do not ask the night to become day before its time. We stay with what is here. A moth lands on a broad leaf near the channel. Its wings are patterned like bark, grey and brown, nearly impossible to see when it closes them. It is visible only because it moved. Once still, it becomes leaf shadow. Camouflage here is not dramatic concealment. It is a way of being gently unclaimed by attention. Many creatures in the swamp are shaped by the need to avoid notice. Dark water hides fish. Mottled skin hides frogs. Bark-colored wings hide moths. Brown fur and night movement hide mammals. This does not make the place frightening. It makes it restful, because so much life is allowed to exist without being brightly exposed. You can take comfort in that. The Borneo Blackwater swamp forest is a world where being unseen is natural. It does not mean being absent. It means being held in shade, protected by complexity, and known by the place itself rather than by any watching eye. In sleep, we also move toward that kind of protected darkness. The channel turns again, and we follow its slow curve. The bank on one side rises into a tangle of saplings, while the other dissolves into flooded roots. Reflections make it difficult to tell which trunks are above the water and which are mirrored below. The whole forest seems doubled, and the doubled forest trembles whenever a drop falls. In Blackwater, reflection can be especially strong because the dark surface mirrors light from above. By day, it may show a green canopy as clearly as polished stone. By night, it holds only faint shapes and the occasional pale flicker of sky. We move through that mirrored world without needing to know which half is more real. Small catfish may search the bottom here, feeling their way with sensitive barbels through leaf litter and soft sediment. They do not depend on clear sight. They read touch, smell, and taste in the water, finding food where the eye would see only darkness. The swamp rewards such close embodied knowledge. It teaches life to listen with more than ears. You can imagine those barbels brushing a submerged leaf, a root fiber, a grain of sediment, and the soft body of an invertebrate. Each contact gives information. Each movement is measured. The fish moves through blackness, as through a familiar room, because for that fish, this tea-colored water is not obscurity. It is home. The Borneo Blackwater swamp forest is a reminder that darkness changes meaning depending on who you are. To us, it may first feel like a limit. To many creatures here, it is shelter, signal, nursery, pathway, and cover. As we drift longer, our own sense of darkness changes too. It becomes less like absence and more like a slow, enveloping kindness. The rain returns lightly, but only as a fine tapping in the upper leaves. It takes time to reach us. Drops collect, combine, and fall from the canopy in larger, slower beads. One lands near us with a gentle sound, sending rings outward beneath the overhanging roots. The rings meet the bank and fade, as all small disturbances do. Rainwater entering peat swamp forests can be very low in minerals, especially after passing through vegetation and organic soils. As it moves through decomposing leaves and peat, it becomes colored and chemically altered. The result is the soft, acidic blackwater that defines this ecosystem. Science gives us the words, but the forest gives us the feeling, drop by drop. You may feel that feeling as a downward ease, though we are moving sideways through water. The dark channel, the close air, the repeated sounds and the slow chemistry all suggest descent. Not a descent into danger, but into quiet. Not into emptiness, but into a more hidden kind of fullness. The Borneo Blackwater swamp forest lets us sink without leaving the surface. A branch above carries orchids or epiphytes, their roots exposed to humid air. They live on the tree without drawing food from its body, using it as a place in the light. Some hold water around their roots or in leaf bases, making tiny wet habitats high above the swamp. Even above the ground, the forest creates small reflections of its flooded self. In those elevated pockets, mosquito larvae, tiny insects, and perhaps small frogs may find places to live or breed. The swamp repeats its patterns upward. Water held in a plant resembles water held in a root hollow, and both resemble the larger pools below. You can sense a kind of fractal calm, where the same wet idea appears at many scales. The Borneo Blackwater swamp forest is ancient in rhythm, even when individual trees are young. Storms open gaps, seedlings rise, trunks fall, peat accumulates, rivers shift, and animal paths change. Yet the deeper pattern continues through water, shade, and leaf return. You do not need to hold all of time in your mind. You only need to feel one slow cycle and let it suggest the rest. A crab moves at the water's edge, partly hidden under a root. Its legs touch the mud with delicate care. It picks at organic matter, small fragments of food, and whatever the wet margin provides. The movement is methodical, almost meditative. Then it pauses, tucked beneath the root, becoming a dark shape among other dark shapes. Margins like this are full of feeding. Fallen fruit softens, leaves decay, insects fall from branches, fish approach from water, crabs from mud, ants from roots, and microbes from everywhere. The Borneo Blackwater swamp forest gathers nourishment at boundaries, where many lives can reach the same small offering from different worlds. You can imagine a fruit landing in the channel during the day, bright for a while against dark water. By night it has softened. Fish nibble at it, insects visit. Perhaps a mammal takes part of it from the bank. Its seeds may remain, sink, float away, or be carried elsewhere. The whole event is quiet, but it helps connect canopy, water, and peat. The smell of fruit may draw animals we never see. A slow loris might move through branches with careful hands, feeding on gum, nectar, fruit, or insects. Its movement is unhurried, almost dreamlike, well suited to the soft night. We let it remain mostly imagined, because the forest is full of lives that pass near us without needing to become central. There is peace in not making everything central. The swamp itself is the center, and each creature is one expression of it. The fish does not stand apart from black water. The frog does not stand apart from humidity. The tree does not stand apart from peat. And you, listening now, do not have to stand apart from rest. We drift into a stretch where the canopy lowers, and leaves hang close to the water. Some are glossy, some torn, some patterned by insects. When they brush the surface, they make tiny lines that fade behind them. The air here feels enclosed but not heavy, like a room made of living green. The Borneo Blackwater swamp forest has many such rooms, each one entered without a door. Inside this shaded room, sound becomes even softer. The insect chorus continues, but filtered by leaves. Drops fall from above at irregular intervals. A fish touches the surface once, then the channel is smooth again. Your breathing can lengthen because nothing asks it to hurry. Even thought can become slower, more like water moving around roots. Roots are the quiet architecture of this place. Buttress roots brace trunks in shallow, wet soils, while fine roots gather nutrients near the surface. Some roots tolerate low oxygen during flooding, and some trees develop structures that help them endure saturated ground. The forest's beauty is partly anatomical, shaped by practical responses to water and scarcity. You may see a buttress root rising beside us, like a dark wooden wall. Its face slick with moisture, ferns grow near its base, and ants follow a line along its ridge. The root is both support and pathway, both structure and habitat. It turns a single tree into a landscape for smaller lives. When you look gently, every tree becomes many places at once. The Borneo Blackwater swamp forest asks for this kind of layered seeing. A trunk is not only a trunk, it is bark for insects, perch for birds, root for ants, anchor for vines, shade for fish, and future peat when it falls. A leaf is not only a leaf, it is food, shelter, stain, signal, and eventually part of the dark ground. We float beneath this complexity without needing to sort it completely. Sorting belongs to daylight and notebooks. Tonight we can let knowledge move softly, like the current, bringing understanding without turning it sharp. You know enough to feel why the water is dark, why the peat is deep, why the small fish rise for air, and why the forest seems to breathe in cycles. A pale flower falls from above, turning slowly as it comes. It lands on the water and floats beside a brown leaf, the two moving together for a while. White and brown, fresh and decaying, surface and depth, all sharing the same slow path. The image is simple, and because it is simple, it can stay with you easily. Freshness and decay are not opposites here, they are neighbors. New leaves grow from nutrients released by old leaves. Flowers become fruit, fruit becomes food, seeds become trees, and fallen trees become peat or habitat. The Borneo Blackwater swamp forest does not separate beginnings and endings as cleanly as we sometimes do. It lets them overlap in the damp shade. A low call comes from farther off, perhaps a bird disturbed into brief speech or a mammal crossing a branch. The sound does not break the calm. It enters, lingers, and fades back into insect song. We continue along the channel at the same pace. The water remains dark beneath us, the trees remain steady, and the night remains kind. You can imagine the sky above the canopy, wide and star-filled beyond the leaves. But down here, the stars are hidden. Their absence makes the forest feel deeper, as if the canopy has become a soft ceiling over a sleeping world. We do not need the sky tonight. The Blackwater has its own dark brightness, held in reflections and small movements. In the Borneo Blackwater swamp forest, light often arrives indirectly. It reflects from water, filters through leaves, glints from eyes, or lies briefly along a fish's side. Direct brightness is rare, and perhaps that is why each small gleam feels meaningful. You learn not to ask for much light. A little is enough. The same may be true of sound, movement, and knowledge. A little call tells you frogs are near. A small ripple tells you fish are feeding. A faint scent tells you flowers have opened somewhere above. The forest gives information in low tones, and we receive it in low tones. Nothing needs to be enlarged. As we move farther, the channel becomes almost straight for a while, bordered by dark trunks at irregular intervals. The space ahead is not visible for long, because branches cross and shadows gather. That limited view makes the journey feel slower. You can only be where you are, with the nearest roots, the nearest leaves, and the nearest breath. This is a useful kind of darkness for sleep. It narrows the world without making it empty. It removes the far horizon and leaves only gentle nearness. Your body can stop reaching outward. Your mind can stop arranging distant things. The Borneo Blackwater swamp forest offers just enough to hold attention and enough shadow to let attention rest. A small school of fish hovers near the bank, each body aligned loosely with the others. They adjust position with tiny fin movements, keeping to the shelter of overhanging roots. When one shifts, the others respond, and the group changes shape without urgency. Their coordination is quiet, nearly invisible, unless you watch for it. Schooling in dim water can help fish find food, avoid being singled out, and respond to disturbances through group movement. But here, described in the dark, it looks like a single thought passing through many small bodies. The fish turn, pause, and turn again. Then they fade into the leaf shadows, and the water seems empty once more. Above them, a branch carries a line of ants moving between a nest and a food source. Each ant follows scent trails laid by others, and together they make a living path. The trail curves around bark ridges, crosses a vine, and disappears into leaves. You might not notice it from far away, but close by it feels purposeful and calm. A tiny river over wood. The Borneo Blackwater swamp forest is full of rivers that are not only water. Ants make rivers of bodies. Seeds make rivers through animals. Nutrients make rivers through decay. Scent makes rivers through night air. Water is the visible flow, but not the only one. And as we drift, we begin to sense the hidden currents moving with us. A cluster of mushrooms glows pale against a fallen log, not glowing with light, but bright by contrast in the dimness. Their caps are damp and delicate. They will not last long in this form, yet the fungal body inside the wood may continue its slow work beyond our seeing. What appears briefly above the surface is only part of a larger, hidden life. That hiddenness repeats everywhere. The tree above is supported by unseen roots. The water's color comes from invisible dissolved compounds. The peat below contains old plant matter we cannot see. Animal paths continue beyond our view. The Borneo Blackwater swamp forest is a place where the unseen is not mysterious in a restless way, but comforting in its depth. You may let your eyes close for a moment and still remain here. The forest can be held by sound and scent. Insects weave the air. Drops touch leaves. Peat smells dark and wet. Warm humidity rests on your face. When you open your eyes again in imagination, the Blackwater is still there, waiting without impatience. We pass into a slightly wider flooded area, where tree trunks stand like dark columns in shallow water. The surface between them is open enough to reflect the canopy. This may have been a lower patch of ground, filled by rain and slow drainage, or part of a seasonal floodplain where the forest becomes more aquatic for a time. Whatever its cause, it feels like entering a quiet hall. In this hall, fish can move between trunks, and frogs can call from low branches over water. Aquatic insects have more open surface to explore. Fallen leaves spread out rather than piling quickly against roots. The Borneo Blackwater swamp forest changes its rooms subtly, and each change invites a slightly different community of lives. A frog clings to a thin branch just above the water. Its throat moves as it calls, swelling and softening. The call travels across the flooded space, touches trunks, and is answered from somewhere behind us. You can imagine the sound as a thread drawn through darkness, connecting one small body to another across the warm, wet air. Amphibians are especially tied to moisture, and swamp forests give them many kinds of wet places. Pools, puddles, tree holes, flooded roots, and damp leaf litter all become possible homes or breeding sites. Their skins require care from the environment, and here the environment is generous with humidity. Even the air feels drinkable. A faint mist seems to form near the surface, though it may be only the soft mixing of warm water and cooler night air. It blurs the roots and low trunks. The effect is not dramatic, only soothing, as if the forest has lowered a thin veil. Through it, every shape becomes less demanding, edges fade, and the mind can loosen around them. The Borneo Blackwater swamp forest often exists in this softened state, between clear categories and hard outlines. Water softens land, humidity softens air, tannins soften light, leaf litter softens sound underfoot. Even time feels softened, because change happens slowly enough to seem like stillness until you look back across seasons. A turtle surfaces near the base of a trunk, just enough to breathe. Its head breaks the water, pauses, then slips below. The rings move outward, touching the reflected canopy. It does not hurry away. It simply returns to the brown depth where it had been resting or searching. The moment leaves almost no trace. Turtles in such wetlands may feed on plant matter, fruit, invertebrates, or small aquatic animals, depending on species and opportunity. They connect water and land as they move, bask, nest, feed and shelter. In our quiet passage, they feel like old thoughts rising briefly to the surface, then sinking back into the dark. A larger fish moves under us, not large in a startling way, just larger than the tiny flashes near the roots. Its motion is slow and muscular, felt more as a change in the water than seen directly. The leaf shadows shift, and then it is gone. The Borneo Blackwater swamp forest often speaks in these partial signs. You may notice how little certainty is required for wonder. We do not need to identify every sound. We do not need to see every animal clearly. We can know the larger pattern: peat, tannin, roots, rain, fish, frogs, insects, trees, and let the details remain gently open. The half-known can be restful when it is held without fear. The water carries us toward another narrow passage, and the trunks crowd close again. Vines hang in loose curves overhead. Some touch the water and trail along the surface. A leaf caught on one vine trembles with the slow movement of the current. The scene is almost still, but almost still is enough. It keeps the world breathing. Vines climb toward light by using the tree's height, and in doing so they add roots through the canopy. Animals use them as bridges. Insects shelter among them. Leaves from vines add to the litter below. The Borneo Blackwater swamp forest is not made of isolated trees, but of connections. Some woody, some watery, some fragrant, some almost invisible. A bat passes through the narrow opening ahead, then another, both gone before the eye can settle. They are feeding in the space above the water, where insects gather. Their flight is quick, but the mood does not quicken with them. They are part of the night current, moving through the air as fish move through the dark channel below. Echolocation maps the world for them in returning sound. A trunk, a leaf, an insect, an open path, all appear through echoes too high for us to hear. In the Blackwater swamp, where our sight is limited, it is calming to remember that other senses make other maps. Darkness does not erase the world. It invites different ways of knowing. We pass under the vine where the leaf trembles and the water opens beyond it. A faint grayness suggests that clouds have thinned above the canopy. The forest remains dark, but not entirely. Wet leaves hold tiny highlights. Roots shine along their edges. The Blackwater reflects a low, muted sky through gaps in the leaves. The Borneo Blackwater swamp forest at night is not one shade of black. It is brown-black water, green-black foliage, silver-black bark, and warm black air scented with peat. It is a whole palette of darkness. When you rest inside it long enough, darkness becomes detailed, and detail becomes soothing. A line of bubbles rises near the bank, one after another. They may come from gases released in the saturated peat, or from something moving below. Each bubble opens at the surface with a small rounded sound. Then the water closes over it. The repetition is slow enough to feel like the swamp thinking in its sleep. In waterlogged soils, decomposition can produce gases because microbes work without much oxygen. These processes are part of the peatland's chemistry, part of how organic matter transforms in saturated darkness. The explanation is simple, but the experience is delicate. A bubble rises from below, touches the air, and vanishes. What was hidden becomes briefly present. You can let that image rest in you. Thoughts may rise the same way from deeper layers into awareness, then open and disappear without needing to be followed. The forest gives us permission for that. It does not hold every ripple forever. It lets each one pass back into stillness. The channel now carries more floating leaves, suggesting a tree above has shed during recent rain. Some leaves are long and narrow, some broad and leathery, some broken into small pieces. They collect at the edge of a root mat, forming a brown raft. Small insects stand on it, and tiny spiders move between curled edges. Even a floating pile of leaves becomes a little island. These leaf rafts may drift, lodge, sink, or become nurseries for microbes and invertebrates. Fish may search below them for food. Frogs may rest on them briefly. Their importance lies not in permanence, but in the temporary shelter and nourishment they offer. The Borneo Blackwater swamp forest is generous with temporary things. Temporary does not mean unimportant here. A puddle lasting a few weeks may hold tadpoles. A fruiting event lasting days may feed many animals. A fallen branch may guide movement until it softens and collapses. The forest is made of long cycles, but within them are many short openings, each one useful, each one quietly received. You may feel the night growing deeper, although the hour is not named. The insects have settled into steadiness. The frogs call less often, or perhaps we have grown used to them. The water's darkness feels wider now. The Borneo Blackwater swamp forest has drawn us farther from the bright idea of day and closer to its inward, resting life. A small owl or night bird may watch from a branch, its body still, its feathers blending into bark. It listens more than it moves. The forest provides sound as information, and stillness as strategy. If it flies, the movement will be soft, briefly changing the air, and then becoming part of the dark again. We do not need to see it clearly to feel its presence. Predation exists here, as it exists in all ecosystems, but tonight we speak of it gently. A fish takes an insect. A frog takes a moth. A bird takes a frog. Nutrients pass through bodies, and bodies return to the system in time. The swamp is not sentimental, yet it is not cruel. It is simply continuous. That continuity can be calming. Nothing stands apart for long. Leaf becomes watercolor, wood becomes fungus food, fruit becomes animal movement, and peat becomes the ground of future trees. You, listening in the dark, can let your own edges soften a little. Breath becomes part of room air. Weight becomes part of bed. Thought becomes part of silence. We turn into another bend, and the Borneo Blackwater swamp forest seems to lean closer. The bank rises slightly on one side, thick with saplings and tangled roots. On the other, the water spreads into a shallow flooded grove. The trunks there are thin, numerous, and dark, standing in rows that are not rows at all, but the pattern of seeds, light and wet ground. Seedlings in peat swamp forest must endure shade, acidity, flooding, and competition. Many will not reach the canopy, but their presence still matters. They hold soil, feed insects, provide cover, and wait for chance. The forest's future is always present in these small green bodies, even if only a few will become tall trees. Waiting is woven into their leaves. A young tree's leaves may be tougher or chemically defended to reduce feeding by insects. Another plant may grow quickly when light appears. Another may tolerate deep shade for years. The diversity of strategies is quiet, but real. The Borneo Blackwater swamp forest is a school of patience where every species has learned one way of staying. You can rest your mind on that word, staying. Roots stay in wet peat. Fish stay near shelter. Frogs stay near moisture. Seeds stay until conditions change. Even the water stays long enough to darken with tannins. In a world that often pulls attention outward, this forest is about remaining, absorbing, and slowly becoming. A faint glimmer appears where a gap in the canopy reflects on the channel. The black water holds it like a piece of sky laid flat. A fish crosses beneath, bending the glimmer into wavering lines. Then the surface clears again. You may feel that you are not moving through a landscape so much as through a long, quiet reflection. Reflection here is more than visual. The forest reflects rain in its water, old leaves in its peat, animal paths in its seedling patterns, and night in its dark surface. It reflects slowness back to us. If you arrive restless, it does not argue. It simply remains slow until your restlessness begins to lose its edges. The Borneo Blackwater swamp forest is also shaped by rivers beyond this small channel. Large rivers, tributaries, and flood pulses influence how water moves across lowland basins. In some places, peat domes form, slightly raised areas fed mostly by rain, with very low nutrient input. The plants there become even more specialized, and the water can be especially dark and soft. We do not need to travel far to feel that rain-fed quality. The channel around us has the quiet taste of leaves rather than stone. There is little sense of rushing mineral water. Instead, there is stored rain, filtered through canopy and peat, carrying the forest's own dissolved signature. It feels intimate, as if the water belongs entirely to these trees. On the underside of a leaf, a sleeping butterfly may hang with wings closed. By day, it might show color, but now it is a slim shadow with folded patterns. Night asks many bright creatures to become muted. That muting is not loss. It is another phase of belonging, another way of being safe inside the forest's low light. You can feel your own brightness softening too. The day's sharp edges, tasks, and names begin to lose their outline. The Borneo Blackwater swamp forest does not erase them. It lets them sink beneath a layer of calm, like leaves settling below the surface. They can rest there without needing your attention. A gentle current returns, barely noticeable at first. It draws a line of floating leaves toward the wider water ahead. We move with them. The roots on either side loosen their hold on the channel, and the canopy lifts slightly. More air enters this space, carrying the scent of rain from beyond the trees. It is still night, still humid, still warm. In the wider water, fish may have more room to forage, but also more exposure. Many remain near structure, using branches, roots, and leaf mats as cover. Structure is important in dark water, not only as shelter, but as a map. A fish can remember root tangles, submerged logs, bank edges, and openings just as we remember rooms and paths. The submerged log beside us is furred with algae, fungi, bacteria, and fine debris. Small grazers move along it. Their feeding helps turn surfaces into energy for other lives. The log itself slows water and gathers leaves behind it. One object becomes many processes. The swamp's complexity often begins with something as simple as wood lying still. The Borneo Blackwater swamp forest has no need to hurry its transformations. A log may take years to soften fully. Peat may take centuries to deepen. A tree may wait decades for a canopy opening. Rain may take long, winding routes before it leaves the basin. To drift here is to feel time broaden, not into emptiness, but into quiet usefulness. A cluster of eyeshine appears low near the bank, then disappears as the angle changes. It might belong to a spider, a small animal, or another night creature catching faint light. We do not move closer. The brief glimmer is enough. The forest gives a sign, then folds the sign back into shadow. That is part of its grace. You may hear water draining somewhere through roots, a thin trickle hidden under leaves. It suggests that the swamp is not as still as it looks. Water is always finding slow paths, through peat pores, under root mats, across shallow depressions, along channels like this one. The movement may be too slow to watch, but it is enough to shape the whole ecosystem. Hydrology is the quiet framework of Blackwater swamp forest. How high the water rises, how long it stays, how slowly it drains, and how often it floods, determine which plants thrive and which animals find shelter. These are not abstract controls. They are the reason a frog calls here, a fish nests there, and a tree spreads roots in a certain shape. We pass a root arch, where the water beneath is especially dark. It looks like an opening into deeper shadow, though it may be only a shallow pocket. Small fish hover near it, entering and leaving with careful turns. To them, the arch is a familiar shelter. To us, it is a quiet invitation to imagine the hidden spaces under everything. Under roots, life continues in close quarters. Detritus gathers, insects molt, fish rest, microbes work, and fine sediments settle. The Borneo Blackwater swamp forest has many undersides, each one protected from strong light and open movement. Sleep itself is a kind of underside, a sheltered interval where the visible life of the day gives way to restoration. A leaf brushes your imagined shoulder as we drift beneath it. It is cool with rainwater and smooth along its edge. The touch is light enough to be almost nothing, yet it brings the forest near. You can smell the green surface, wet and living, above the deeper peat scent. The sensory world here is close, soft, and layered. This closeness matters for the mood of the place. There are no wide vistas now, no distant cliffs, no open sea horizon. The vastness of the Borneo Blackwater swamp forest comes through repetition and depth, through thousands of trunks, countless leaves, and hidden channels looping through peat. It is a vastness that surrounds rather than opens, and so it feels sheltering. A long vine trails into the water and has collected a necklace of small floating debris. Leaf pieces, flower fragments, and thin twigs gather there. Underneath, a tiny fish waits in the shade. Above, an insect walks along the vine's wet surface. The same line connects air and water, chance and shelter, falling and holding. You might notice that the swamp often creates shelter by slowing things down. Slow water drops leaves. Dropped leaves make cover. Cover holds small creatures. Small creatures feed larger ones. Slow decay builds peat. Peat holds water. Held water makes black water. The chain is circular and calm, and we are drifting inside it. The Borneo Blackwater swamp forest is especially good at teaching circular thinking. Instead of beginnings and endings, it offers returns. Rain returns to channels. Leaves return to peat. Nutrients return to roots. Seeds return as saplings if conditions allow. Calls return as answers in the night. Even ripples return to stillness after they have traveled as far as they can. A faint pale line appears along the edge of a clouded sky above the canopy. Though dawn is still far away, it may be moonlight diffused through mist. It touches the tallest leaves and makes them just visible. Below, we remain in shadow. The layered light makes the forest feel deep from top to bottom, with the upper world barely silvered and the lower world almost black. Some animals may be most active in these dim transitions, when visibility changes, but the air remains cool and damp. Others keep to full night or full day. The timing of activity reduces competition, avoids exposure, and follows food availability. In a place this complex, time is another habitat. Creatures occupy hours the way they occupy branches or pools. We occupy the late, quiet hour. It suits us. The Borneo Blackwater swamp forest asks for no decisions now. We can let the science remain present but soft, a low guiding thread beneath the sensory world. Peat, tannins, acidity, flooding, adaptation, mutualism, decay, and renewal all move together, not as a lecture, but as the forest's own slow voice. A fish rises again near the surface, and this time you see its mouth briefly open to the air. The motion is delicate and practiced. It returns below a floating leaf, where its body almost disappears. That small breath at the waterline feels strangely intimate. It reminds you that life here often depends on small openings, taken gently when they appear. Openings are everywhere, though subtle. A gap in the canopy for a seedling, a bubble nest under a leaf for eggs, a rotting log for insects, a flooded margin for fish, a night flower for moths, a quiet channel for us. The Borneo Blackwater swamp forest is not closed. It is open in hidden ways. We follow the current into a place where the bank is lined with pandan, their long leaves arching outward like green blades softened by rain. Their edges may be sharp to touch, but in the dimness they look graceful, almost ribbon-like. Water gathers at their bases and leaf litter collects among their roots. Small animals use these dense plants for cover. Pandan and other understory plants help structure the swamp's lower layers. They shade the water, trap organic matter, and provide surfaces for insects, spiders, and small vertebrates. Their tangled growth can make movement difficult for larger bodies, but perfect for smaller ones. You can sense the forest becoming a shelter made of many scales, each scale fitting a different life. A snail moves along a submerged stem, slow enough to be nearly still. Its body extends and contracts, feeling the surface. It grazes on films of algae and microbes that grow where light and nutrients permit. In such a nutrient-poor environment, even thin films matter. The snail writes its path in feeding, though the mark is too small for us to see. That scale of life can be comforting. Not every important action is visible. Not every useful work is recognized. The Borneo Blackwater swamp forest continues because countless small processes continues. Because countless small processes continues. Because countless small processes continues. Many of them hidden, many of them slow, none of them needing applause. As you rest, you can let that truth become very gentle inside you. A soft drop falls from a pandan leaf into the water, then another. The drops are spaced irregularly, which makes them feel natural and unforced. Their sound is rounded by the air and absorbed by the peat-lined banks. You might imagine them as small bells made of water, ringing once and then becoming the silence they entered. The channel's surface holds floating pollen, tiny fragments, and the occasional insect wing. These small things drift together until a current separates them. Below, the dark water filters their outlines. Above, leaves continue to release more. The swamp is always receiving from itself. This receiving is one of its most peaceful qualities. We drift near a tree whose bark peels in thin patches, revealing lighter wood beneath. Ants explore the edges. A small lizard clings above them, still as part of the trunk. Moisture beads along the bark's ridges. The tree is not just standing in the swamp. It is participating in it, exchanging water, shade, shelter, leaves, and eventually its own body with the ecosystem around it. Trees in peat swamp forests may include species specially adapted to saturated acidic soils. Some grow tall and straight, others form dense thickets. Some dominate particular zones depending on peat depth, flood frequency, and nutrient conditions. The Borneo Blackwater swamp forest is not uniform, even when its darkness makes it seem so at first. It changes quietly from one stretch to another. You can feel that change in the plants along the bank. Here the roots are denser. There the canopy opens. Here the water is wider. There it narrows into a root tunnel. The differences do not announce themselves loudly, but after drifting for a while, you begin to recognize them as moods within the same forest. A moth lifts from a leaf and travels low over the water. For a few seconds, its pale wings are visible against the black surface. Then it rises into the leaves and disappears. A fish below may have noticed it. A bat above may have noticed it too. The moth belongs to a vertical corridor of attention, moving between water and canopy. Vertical movement is common in this swamp. Insects emerge from aquatic stages and fly upward. Leaves fall from canopy to water. Animals climb down to drink or feed, then return to branches. Seeds drop, float, sink, or sprout. The forest is not only a horizontal maze of channels, it is also a slow rain of matter and movement from above to below. The Borneo Blackwater swamp forest has been raining itself into the peat for ages. Every falling leaf adds a little more to that buried story. Every root that dies below ground leaves a trace. Every flood rearranges the surface and adds new textures. To float here is to pass over a history that is not carved in stone, but soaked into darkness. You may notice the way sleep feels similar, a gradual settling of layers. The surface thoughts drift first, then deeper impressions soften. Memory and sensation mix. The mind becomes less like a clear river and more like black water, tinted by the day, reflective on top, and quietly active below. The forest gives that comparison without forcing it. A frog leaps from a low leaf, but the movement is small and absorbed by water. There is a sound, a soft entry, then rings. It swims beneath the surface and reaches another stem. Its body rests half hidden, eyes above water. The whole action is over, yet nothing feels disturbed. The swamp accepts motion without losing calm. Amphibian life in wet forests depends on water quality, humidity, temperature, and shelter. Acidic black water can host specialized species, while nearby puddles and tree holes offer different conditions. Tadpoles may scrape surfaces, filter particles, or feed in other ways depending on species and habitat. Each frog call we hear belongs to a long chain of adaptations, though tonight it comes to us simply as sound. The insect chorus shifts slightly, becoming lower and more continuous. It may be our imagination or a real change in who is calling. Night is not one fixed community. Different insects begin, pause, and end at different times. The soundscape is a slow rotation, and we move through it as if through layers of warm rain. A distant branch creaks. The sound travels through the trees and fades. Perhaps weight moved above, or wood adjusted after rain. The Borneo Blackwater swamp forest is full of such small structural sounds, reminders that living wood is always responding to moisture, gravity, growth, and age. Even stillness has mechanics. Even quiet has causes. You can take that thought and let it be soft. Your own stillness also has causes. Breath slowing, muscles releasing, eyelids growing heavy, the room around you dim. Nothing has to happen suddenly. Rest can assemble itself gradually, the way peat assembles beneath a forest, through small additions that do not seem important until they have made a depth. The channel ahead narrows again beneath interlaced branches. We move toward it slowly, following a line of darker water. The roots on both sides appear to lean inward, though they are only growing where the bank allows. A faint scent of flowers returns, mixed with wet bark and the steady earth smell of peat. The Borneo Blackwater swamp forest keeps offering the same elements in new arrangements. This repetition is part of its piece. Water, root, leaf, insect, frog, fish, tree, peat, and rain return again and again, never quite identical. The mind does not have to solve them. It can simply recognize them. Recognition is restful, especially when nothing startling interrupts it. We are held by patterns old enough to feel trustworthy. A tiny glint appears under the surface, then another. A few fish have gathered where insects fall from overhanging leaves. They rise one by one, each movement brief and clean. The water rings overlap, then dissolve. There is feeding here, but no frenzy. It is simply night work, done in the manner the forest permits. Food webs in Blackwater swamps often rely heavily on material from the forest itself. Leaves, fruits, flowers, insects, and woody debris enter the water and support aquatic life. The boundary between terrestrial and aquatic food is porous. A caterpillar falling from a branch may feed a fish may feed a bird may carry seeds. Everything crosses over. We are crossing over too, in a quieter sense, between waking and sleep. The forest helps because it is already a place of crossings. Land into water, leaf into peat, day into night, breath into calm. The Borneo Blackwater swamp forest gives the mind permission to become less separate from the dark around it. A submerged root catches our attention because it is covered in fine silt, making it look almost velvet. Small tracks or marks cross the surface, left by snails or larvae. A strand of plant matter waves beside it. The movement is slight, caused by current too weak to feel directly. Even where the water seems motionless, it is quietly touching everything. Touch is everywhere here. Water touches roots. Roots touch peat. Leaves touch water. Insects touch bark. Air touches damp skin. You can feel the whole forest as a network of gentle contact. None of it hurried, all of it continuous. This is a useful image for rest, because sleep often arrives through contact, through the weight of blankets, the support of a mattress, the softness of still air. The Borneo Blackwater swamp forest continues around us, patient and layered, as the channel carries us under another arch of leaves. The world ahead is dark, but not empty. It holds more roots, more fish, more damp hollows, more unseen flowers, more breathing creatures in the trees. We do not need to reach them quickly. They are waiting in the same slow water, and we are moving at the pace the forest has given us. At that given pace, the channel seems to lengthen without becoming distant, as if the Borneo Blackwater swamp forest is unfolding one quiet room at a time. We pass beneath leaves still beaded with rain, and each bead holds a small, dim version of the world. Your attention can rest on those tiny reflections. They tremble when the leaf moves, then steady again, the way a thought steadies when it is no longer chased. The water beside us carries the dark warmth of the forest floor. It is not clear in the mountain stream sense, but it is clear in its own language, full of dissolved leaves and old peat. When a root enters it, the root disappears within a handspan. When a fish enters it, only a slight pressure in the surface remains. The black water does not hide things harshly. It holds them gently. We drift toward a place where the trees grow taller and their buttress roots flare wide above the wet ground. These roots make shadowed alcoves at their bases, and in the alcoves, leaf litter has gathered in damp brown piles. Tiny beetles move through the softened leaves. Springtails and mites work among the fragments. The smallest lives are often the first to begin the forest's returning, chewing and loosening what has fallen from above. You might imagine kneeling beside one of those root alcoves, not to disturb it, but only to see how much happens in a space smaller than your palm. A curled leaf shelters an insect egg. A thread of fungus crosses a vein. A seed rests half buried in dark crumbs of peat. The Borneo Blackwater swamp forest is immense, yet it keeps making little chambers of care. A soft breeze passes higher up, and a delayed rustle travels down through the canopy. It arrives in layers, first as a high whisper, then as a faint motion among the lower leaves. The water answers with only the smallest shiver. You can feel the air's moisture on your face, warm and fine, carrying the scent of green leaves and the deeper scent of long-soaked ground. The trunks around us are marked by old flood heights, faint stains and dark bands showing where water once rested. During wetter seasons, the channel may spread beyond its banks and cover the low forest floor. Fish can then enter places that are now only damp hollows. Frogs may breed where water lingers. Seeds may float into new corners. The forest remembers these levels in lines. We continue along one of those remembered paths, where water has passed often enough to shape the ground. The peat is soft at the edges, undercut in small places, held together by roots and fine fibers. If you look closely, you can see how the bank is not a hard border. It is a frayed edge, continually made and remade by rain, decay, and the slow movement of water. The Borneo Blackwater swamp forest teaches that edges can be alive. At the bank, land feeds water with leaves and fruit. Water feeds land by carrying seeds, moisture, and dissolved matter. Animals cross back and forth, using both sides as one home. Your mind may want to separate things, but the swamp keeps blending them until separation becomes less important than relationship. A small fish rests just beneath a floating leaf, its body nearly parallel with the surface. Its fins pulse lightly to hold position. It may be watching for insects above or sheltering from a larger fish below. The leaf above it is both roof and shadow, an ordinary fallen thing made useful by where it happens to rest. In this forest, accident and design often feel similar. Nearby, a water strider moves over the surface, standing on tension as if the water were a delicate skin. Each step makes a tiny dimple. The fish below may read those dimples as information. The surface is not just a line between air and water, but a busy membrane where signals cross. We drift beside it, listening to a language of touch too small for us to hear directly. The canopy opens slightly, and the channel receives a faint wash of pale night. It does not brighten the water so much as reveal its depth of color. Brown becomes red-brown, black becomes amber at the edges. Leaves under the surface appear and disappear as the angle changes. You can sense why people call this water black, and also why that word is only a beginning. Black water holds the chemistry of the forest. It carries tannins, humic acids, and other compounds from decaying plant material. These substances alter light, acidity, and habitat, shaping who can live here and how they live. Yet when you are drifting through it, the chemistry feels like mood, a soft darkening of the world that invites the body to slow down. A branch hangs low across the opening, heavy with epiphytes. Their roots cling to bark and air, taking moisture from rain and humidity rather than soil below. Some leaves form little cups where water gathers. In those tiny reservoirs, insects may breed, and small organisms may live their whole lives above the flooded ground. The swamp repeats itself in miniature, high in the trees. You can imagine one of those leaf cups holding a thumbnail of dark rainwater. A dead insect rests at the bottom. A larva moves through the small pool. A speck of fallen pollen floats on the surface. Above the larger Blackwater channel, another tiny Blackwater world is held in a plant, and the forest seems to dream its own pattern again and again. The Borneo Blackwater swamp forest is not only a place of horizontal wandering. It is stacked with levels of wetness. There is water in the channel, water in the peat, water in tree hollows, water in plant cups, water held as vapor in the thick air. Every layer carries moisture differently, and every layer offers life a different kind of shelter. A slow drip begins from one epiphyte cup, overflow after the rain. It falls from leaf to leaf before reaching the channel. Each impact softens the drop's journey, breaking it into smaller sounds. By the time it touches the Blackwater, it has passed through several small worlds. You can let that descent guide your breathing, down through leaves, down through shade, down into calm. We move past a tree whose crown is lost in darkness. Its roots spread across the wet ground like the ribs of an old boat. Between them, shallow pools reflect only black. A frog sits at one pool's edge, almost the same color as the leaf litter. Its eye catches a small glint, and then the glint is gone. Stillness is its camouflage. Frogs in this forest may choose calling sites with care, balancing moisture, acoustic reach, and shelter. A slightly raised root can project a call across a pool. A low leaf may keep the body hidden while the voice travels outward. The swamp's structure shapes sound, and sound shapes the distance between bodies in the dark. The calling seems simple, but the place is part of every note. You hear another call from deeper in the trees, lower and slower than the first. It is answered after a pause. The pause matters. It gives the sound room to fade, and gives the night its spaciousness. We do not count the calls. We only let them arrive and leave, the way floating leaves arrive at a root and then move on. The Borneo Blackwater swamp forest is often quiet in a way that contains many small voices. The listener's mind can rest because no single sound dominates for long. Insects weave the background. Frogs place soft notes within it. Water adds slow punctuation. Leaves shift like fabric. The whole soundscape becomes a blanket, thin enough to breathe through, thick enough to soften the edges of thought. A pale fungus on a fallen branch catches what little light there is. Its fruiting bodies are small, layered, and damp. Beneath them, fungal threads spread through the wood, digesting what the tree once built from sunlight. This is the forest turning itself inward, making old strength available again. The process is not quick, but it is faithful. Fungi are essential in such wet forests, though much of their work is hidden. They break down wood and leaf litter, partner with plant roots, and help cycle nutrients through a system where nutrients are often scarce. Without them, the forest's fallen matter would not return so gracefully. With them, even the dimmest corner becomes part of exchange. We float beside that branch for a while, letting the idea of exchange settle. Nothing here is isolated for very long. The fallen branch feeds fungi. The fungi change the branch. Insects enter the softened wood. Birds and lizards search for those insects. Fragments fall into the water, and the water carries them elsewhere. The swamp is one long, slow conversation. A fine mist rests above the channel now, visible only where it dims the space between roots. It smells like wet leaves and distant rain. You can feel it on your face as the lightest coolness within the warm air. The Borneo Blackwater swamp forest seems to be breathing through it, exhaling moisture that never fully leaves. Mist softens distance even more. The next tree is visible, but the one beyond it fades. The channel ahead exists as a dark suggestion. This limited sight can feel comforting, because it asks only for the nearest moment. There is no need to imagine the whole forest at once. One root, one ripple, one breath, and then another. A quiet movement passes under the water near the bank, pushing a leaf aside from below. Perhaps a catfish is nosing through the litter, or a small turtle is shifting under cover. The leaf tilts, shows its pale underside, and settles again. We do not see the animal clearly. The Borneo Blackwater swamp forest allows the sign to be enough. In such dark water, touch and smell become reliable guides. Fish with sensitive barbels can explore the bottom by contact. Others detect chemical traces carried through the water. Some rely on lateral lines to sense vibration and pressure changes. The world is richly available to them, even when it seems hidden from us. Darkness is not absence. It is another arrangement of senses. You can let your own senses rearrange too. The imagined sight of the forest becomes softer, while sound and touch grow more important. The dampness of air, the warm stillness around your skin, the hush of water against roots, the smell of peat and leaf mold, the weight of your body resting where you are. The script becomes less like watching and more like floating. We pass a bank where pandan roots make a tight shelter. Fallen leaves have collected there, stacked and water darkened. A small crab moves slowly among them, lifting and setting its legs with care. Its claws pick at fragments. Its body disappears behind a root, then reappears at another opening. The crab's world is all passages, textures, and edible traces. Crabs and other detritus feeders help turn fallen material into smaller pieces. Those pieces become easier for microbes and other organisms to use. In a forest built on fallen plant matter, such work is quiet but central. You might call it housekeeping, though no one here is keeping a house. The whole swamp is a home, and every fragment has a way back into it. The Borneo Blackwater swamp forest changes as the water rises around roots. In high water, the crab's path may become a fish path. A patch of damp leaf litter may become a shallow pool. In low water, the same place may be crossed by insects and small mammals. The forest's map is rewritten by rain, but the handwriting remains slow. A fruit drops somewhere beyond the trees with a muted sound. It lands not in open water, but on soft leaf litter, so the impact is more felt than heard. Perhaps tomorrow it will be opened by insects. Perhaps a mammal will find it by scent. Perhaps it will soften where it fell, feeding the soil around it. The fruit has entered the cycle. Fruits in swamp forests can be important seasonal pulses of food. When trees fruit, animals alter their paths, gather, feed, and disperse seeds. Some seeds need passage through an animal gut, while others float, sink, or wait in damp ground. The Borneo Blackwater swamp forest depends on these quiet movements of fruit and seed because the next forest is carried inside them. You may imagine an orangutan reaching for fruit in the high canopy earlier in the day, testing branches, choosing slowly, eating with calm concentration. Now in the night, the remains of that meal may lie below or pass through the animal and return elsewhere as seed. The canopy and peat are linked by such ordinary acts. Eating becomes planting without intention. A low branch brushes the channel, and its leaves trail through the water. They gather a thin coating of organic film along the submerged edges. Small invertebrates may graze there. Fish may search among them. The branch, still attached and alive above, becomes habitat below. The boundary between living plant and aquatic structure becomes beautifully blurred. The forest is full of living things becoming useful to other living things without ceasing to be themselves. A tree supports epiphytes and ants while still growing. A leaf shades fish before it falls. A root shelters frogs while feeding the trunk. In the Borneo Blackwater swamp forest, usefulness is layered, and no layer has to announce itself. We drift through another pocket of stillness. The air is so calm that the water reflects each trunk with almost perfect darkness. Then a single insect touches down, and the reflection opens in rings. The rings widen, meet the mirrored trees, and break them into trembling shapes. When the surface settles, the trees return. The swamp practices disappearance and return endlessly. This repetition can draw the listener inward. An image forms, changes, and reforms. A sound rises, fades, and is replaced. A creature appears, vanishes, and leaves the forest whole. You do not need to hold any one thing tightly. The Borneo Blackwater swamp forest keeps offering replacements that are not distractions, but continuations. A narrow channel joins from the left, bringing a faint movement of cooler water. It carries a few pale leaves and the smell of fresher rain. Where the two flows meet, the surface forms delicate patterns, hardly currents, more like slow threads being laid together. We follow the joined water forward. The forest around us seems to widen without growing brighter. Confluences in peat swamp forests can be subtle. One channel may drain a slightly different patch of forest, carrying water with different color, acidity, or organic content. To the creatures living here, those differences may matter. Fish may choose one side or another. Invertebrates may gather where material collects. The meeting of waters becomes a small ecological event. You can feel the idea of meeting without effort. Two waters touch and continue. They do not have to become identical immediately. Their colors, temperatures, and dissolved histories may blend gradually downstream. This is another peaceful lesson from the Borneo Blackwater swamp forest. Not everything needs to resolve at once. A root mat extends from the bank, floating slightly in places where peat and fine roots have bound together. It flexes gently with the water. Plants grow on it, and small openings between roots lead into shadow. Such mats can be fragile, yet full of shelter. They are both ground and raft, living edge and dark underside. Beneath the mat, the water may be low in oxygen, shaded, and rich in organic particles. Specialized fish and invertebrates can use these spaces, avoiding brighter, open water. The mat's upper surface supports mosses, seedlings, and insects. One structure becomes two worlds, divided by only a few inches, joined by moisture. The swamp often works in thin layers. You may sense your own layers now. A surface awareness follows the words. A deeper awareness follows the rhythm. Beneath that, the body receives the calm without needing to name it. The Borneo Blackwater swamp forest is good company for such descent because it too has a surface, a hidden depth, and many soft exchanges between them. A small bird shifts in sleep overhead, rustling once. Then it settles. The sound is barely separate from the leaf movement around it. Birds that feed by day must rest somewhere in this dense green architecture, choosing places that hide them from rain, wind, and watchful eyes. The canopy becomes a city of sleepers, though no lights mark its windows. By morning, some will call from high branches, some will search bark and leaves for insects, and some will visit fruiting trees. But we remain in the night before that waking. The Borneo Blackwater swamp forest is still holding its daytime colors in reserve. Green has become black-green. Brown has become black-brown. Life has not paused. It has shifted downward. A moth brushes the water and lifts again. The surface keeps the memory of its touch for only a moment. Fish may have noticed the disturbance, but none rises this time. The moth continues into the leaves, drawn perhaps by scent, perhaps by pale flowers hidden above. Its wings are quieter than the rain. Night pollination is a soft labor. Flowers that open or scent strongly after dark may receive visits from moths, beetles, bats, or other animals. Each visit is brief, but across a night, many small contacts can carry pollen through the forest. The next fruiting season begins with these almost invisible exchanges. What looks like darkness is full of future growth. We move forward under a canopy that seems to lower again. Leaves overlap so thickly that the sky disappears. The channel becomes a dark ribbon enclosed by roots, trunks, and hanging vines. Water touches the banks with a sound so soft it is more texture than sound. Your breathing can become the main movement you notice. The Borneo Blackwater swamp forest does not need to be open to feel spacious. Its spaciousness is internal. Every root tangle contains passages. Every fallen leaf opens into decomposition. Every tree connects crown, trunk, root, soil, and water. The forest is not a room with high ceilings. It is a fabric with endless depth. A small fish darts from under a root, then stops in open water for a fraction of a second before returning to cover. The movement is quick, but the mood remains slow because the forest absorbs it. The water closes over the space it crossed. The root shadow looks unchanged. Life here can be active without disturbing the larger calm. This is one of the reasons the swamp suits a sleep journey. It does not deny movement, hunger, birth, decay, or change. It simply holds them inside a wide, slow pattern. A listener can rest with that, because nothing needs to be frozen in order to feel peaceful. The Borneo Blackwater swamp forest is alive and quiet at once. We pass near a cluster of seedlings growing from a raised mound of peat and roots. Their leaves are tender, pale compared to the older canopy. Droplets cling along their edges. They may be temporary, or they may be the beginning of trees that will one day shade this channel. For now, they are small green promises in the dark. Seedling survival depends on many small conditions. Too much flooding may drown some roots. Too little light may slow growth beyond recovery. Herbivores may browse young leaves. Fungi may help or harm, yet enough seedlings persist to keep the forest renewing itself. The Borneo Blackwater swamp forest does not guarantee each life, but it keeps making room for beginnings. A termite shelter tube runs along the side of a damp trunk, a narrow covered path made from soil, saliva, and chewed material. Inside it, termites can move protected from open air and predators. Their hidden passage is another example of the forest's covered ways. Even on the surface of a tree, life builds tunnels through shadow. Termites help transform wood and plant matter, assisted by complex microbial partners in their bodies. Their work may seem small, but in tropical forests it can be immense over time. They are part of the great soft machinery of decomposition. The swamp's stillness is built partly by workers too small and hidden for the eye to follow. You can feel how gently scale changes here. A termite tunnel becomes important. A fish mouth breaking the surface becomes important. A single root shelter becomes important. The Borneo Blackwater swamp forest reduces the need for spectacle by making ordinary details deep enough. You do not have to seek anything larger than the next quiet thing. A faint scent of resin appears near a wounded tree, mingling with peat and wet leaves. The tree has sealed or is sealing some old break. In the humid air, the scent travels slowly. It is sharper than the surrounding smells, but still softened by moisture. You notice it, and then it blends back into the forest's general breath. Trees respond to wounds with chemistry, growth, and barriers that protect living tissue. Insects, fungi, and microbes may still arrive, and the outcome depends on many conditions. Even a wound becomes a small ecosystem, with resin, bark, beetles, spores, and time. In the Borneo Blackwater swamp forest, injury does not become drama, it becomes process. We drift past without lingering on harm. The night remains warm, the channel remains dark, the roots continue to hold the bank, and the leaves continue to let water fall. Your body can remain heavy and calm. The forest has room for every process without changing its voice. A group of tiny flies hovers in a sheltered patch above the water, rising and falling as if held by an invisible thread. They gather where air is still and moisture is high. A small frog watches from a leaf nearby. The flies are almost weightless, but they are part of the food web, part of the night, part of the energy that passes through the swamp in delicate forms. Insects are among the great connectors here. They pollinate flowers, feed fish and birds, break down wood, carry seeds or fungi, aerate small pockets, and become prey at many levels. To the sleeping ear they may become only a soft chorus, but the chorus has bodies. Each sound belongs to a life doing its quiet work. The Borneo Blackwater swamp forest hums with those bodies. Not loudly, not insistently, but steadily. You can let the hum blur into the sound of your own room, if there is one, or into the soft quiet behind the voice. The forest does not need your complete attention. It can continue whether you follow every detail or drift between them. A fallen palm frond lies partly in the channel, its leaflets spread like a comb. Water moves through them in thin lines. Debris catches there, forming a small dam of leaves, twigs, and seeds. Behind it, the water is even stiller. A tiny fish shelters in the quiet pocket, using the fallen frond as architecture. Temporary dams like this can create microhabitats, slowing flow and accumulating organic matter. They may last until the next heavier rain rearranges them. In that interval, they feed, shelter, and alter the water around them. The Borneo Blackwater swamp forest is shaped by many structures that do not need to last forever. Their usefulness is measured in moments. You may find that comforting too. Not everything restful has to be permanent. A single quiet evening, a few slow breaths, a soft story of dark water and roots can make a shelter for the mind. The forest's temporary pockets show that calm can gather wherever movement slows, even briefly, even in a world that continues changing. The channel bends around the fallen frond and enters a darker stretch. The canopy here is denser, and the bank is crowded with roots. The smell of peat becomes stronger, rich and damp, with a faint acidic edge. It is not unpleasant. It is the smell of a wet archive, the scent of leaves becoming memory beneath trees. Peat depth influences the forest above it. Where peat is deep and nutrient-poor, plant communities may differ from places with shallower peat or more river influence. Trees, shrubs, and palms arrange themselves along subtle gradients of water and chemistry. To us, the changes are soft, but to the plants they are decisive. They are the quiet rules of place. A soft plop sounds from the bank, followed by a spreading ring. A small fruit may have fallen into the water. It floats, for a while, dark and rounded, turning slowly. Fish approach and retreat. Perhaps it will sink by morning, or lodge among roots, or be carried along the channel. We watch it drift beside us for a few breaths. Fruit in Blackwater can become food for fishes, especially during flooded seasons, when terrestrial material enters the aquatic world. Some tropical fishes are opportunistic, feeding on fruits, seeds, insects, and detritus when available. The forest feeds the water from above, and the water feeds the forest in return through movement, deposition, and life cycles. The boundary remains beautifully porous. The fruit catches against a root and rests there. Around it, tiny ripples fade. We move on, leaving it to the night creatures. This is how much of the forest must be understood, by accepting that every detail continues beyond our seeing. The Borneo Blackwater swamp forest does not end when our attention moves away. It keeps working in the dark. You might feel your eyelids growing heavier here, and the forest allows that. It is still present if you listen with only half your mind. Words become like water around roots. Some pass clearly, some blur. The mood remains. Warm air, dark channel, wet leaves, quiet creatures, and the slow, ancient patience of peat continue underneath everything. A liana hangs down almost to the water, thick and twisting. It began as a searching stem, climbing by using other plants, reaching toward canopy light. Now it makes a strong curve through the understory, a pathway for ants and perhaps small mammals. Vines can connect trees, creating roots through the forest that do not touch the ground. Such connections matter in flooded landscapes. When water covers the floor, arboreal pathways allow animals to move above it. Even when the ground is dry enough, the canopy remains a safer, more efficient world for many species. The Borneo Blackwater swamp forest has roads in the air, roads in the water, and soft roads through leaf litter. We drift below the liana's curve, and the channel narrows into another shadowed throat. Leaves brush each other above us. The water's surface is so close to the roots that everything feels intimate. You can hear single drops now, each one arriving from a different leaf. The pattern is irregular, natural, and soothing, like a slow conversation among plants. Beyond the narrow place, the water widens into a shallow basin. Here the trees stand farther apart, perhaps because the ground holds water longer. The surface reflects their trunks in broken vertical lines. A few floating leaves move in circles, guided by a faint eddy. Nothing pulls strongly in any direction. The basin seems to hold us. Basins like this may warm during the day and cool slowly at night. Oxygen levels can shift with temperature, decomposition, and plant activity. Fish living here must respond to those changes, sometimes seeking surface air, shaded areas, or slight currents. The swamp is gentle in mood, but its conditions are finely tuned, and its inhabitants are skilled readers of change. A small gourami rises near a leaf edge and touches the surface. Its body shows a muted pattern for a moment, delicate against the dark water. Then it drops back into shadow. You can imagine the labyrinth organ inside it, allowing it to use air in a place where dissolved oxygen may be low. Evolution here feels like a whisper repeated over generations. The Borneo Blackwater swamp forest shapes bodies without hurry. A fish learns air. A root learns flooding. A leaf learns shade. A frog learns humid nights. A tree learns scarcity. Over long time, these learnings become anatomy, behavior, and rhythm. Tonight, we do not separate the living thing from the condition that shaped it. We see them together. A faint movement in the canopy suggests a monkey changing position in sleep or moving along a branch. The leaves tremble, and a few drops fall into the basin below. The animal remains unseen. The drops become the visible part of its passing. This is often how the swamp reveals larger lives, through secondary signs rather than clear portraits. Proboscis monkeys are more often associated with riverside and mangrove edge forests, but in Borneo's wet lowlands, different primates may use flooded forests and blackwater margins where food and travel routes allow. They move through trees that overhang water, feeding on leaves, fruits, and seeds. Their presence reminds us that the swamp is connected to broader landscapes of river, peat, and forest. We keep the image soft without turning it into a scene of pursuit. A branch sways, water receives drops, and the night continues. The Borneo Blackwater swamp forest remains the main presence, larger than any one animal. Its creatures appear like thoughts inside it, each one shaped by the whole and then folded back into shade. The basin's edge holds a patch of sedges and low plants. Their stems emerge from shallow water, making vertical lines close together. Insects rest on them. A spider has made a web between two stems, low enough to catch small flying things near the surface. Dew or rain beads along the silk, tracing it in dim light. Wetland plants at the margins slow water and trap sediment. They offer perches, egg-laying sites, and refuge. Their stems create a mesh through which small fish can move and larger bodies cannot easily pass. Structure, again, becomes shelter. The more closely you look, the more the swamp appears as a maker of rooms within rooms. A soft swirl forms near the sedges, then fades. Perhaps a fish has turned, or a turtle has shifted below. The water does not reveal the answer. It does not need to. The uncertainty is gentle, because the forest's mood is steady. You are safe in the listening. You are simply being carried through a dark, living place. The Borneo Blackwater swamp forest holds ancient materials in ordinary darkness. Fallen leaves from last season, wood from past storms, pollen from flowering cycles, and roots that grew before we arrived, are all part of the peat below. This hidden accumulation makes the ground feel almost dreamlike. It is not firm history like stone. It is saturated history, compressing slowly under water and trees. We float above it, and the idea of depth returns. Not ocean depth, but organic depth. A depth made by forests becoming ground, by water preventing full decay, by time thickening into peat. You can feel that depth under the channel as a darkness below darkness. It does not pull. It simply supports the forest from beneath. A tiny feather lies on the surface, caught beside a leaf. It may have fallen from a roosting bird, or drifted from somewhere upstream. It is pale at the edge, dark at the center, and light enough that the water barely notices it. Slowly, it turns. The feather seems like a message from the canopy, but it asks nothing of us. Feathers, leaves, wings, seeds, petals and bark all fall into the Blackwater. Some float, some sink, some are eaten, some lodge in roots. The water is a receiver of forest fragments, and over time, those fragments help create the very chemistry that defines it. The Borneo Blackwater swamp forest writes itself into the water, piece by piece. A frog calls from the sedges, close enough that you can imagine its throat moving. The call is low and rounded, not sharp. Another answers from behind a buttress root. The basin holds the two sounds and softens their edges. Then insects fill the space between them. Your mind can rest on the alternation. Sound, pause, answer, hush, without needing to count. This kind of rhythm supports sleep because it is patterned but not demanding. The forest repeats without becoming mechanical. No two calls are exactly the same. No two drops fall with the same interval. No two ripples spread through identical water. The variation keeps the world alive, while the softness keeps it calm. We leave the basin slowly, moving into another thread of channel. The banks are lower here, and the flooded forest stretches out on both sides. Trunks rise directly from dark water, their bases hidden. The reflection doubles them, so each tree seems to reach both upward and downward. The Borneo Blackwater swamp forest becomes a place of vertical patience, rooted in both air and shadow. At the base of one trunk, a cluster of aerial roots protrudes above the water. They may help with gas exchange or stability in saturated conditions, depending on the species. Wet soils can limit oxygen for roots, so many plants develop ways to cope with flooding. The forms that result can be strangely beautiful because function has been shaped by long necessity into sculpture. You can see those roots as quiet breathing structures, holding the tree in a difficult medium. They do not breathe like lungs, but the image is gentle and useful. The tree stands because it has learned the swamp. It does not wish the ground were dry. It has made its life with water, peat, and low oxygen. The Borneo Blackwater swamp forest offers many such lessons in acceptance without passivity. Creatures do not resist the place by becoming something else entirely. They adapt, shift, and specialize. Fish use air. Trees spread roots. Frogs seek damp hollows. Insects time their flights. And fungi work slowly in saturated wood. The whole ecosystem is a long act of fitting. A pale insect lands on the water and struggles briefly, making small circles. A fish rises and takes it so softly that the surface barely breaks. The moment is part of the food web, but it passes without violence in the telling. The water closes. The rings fade. The forest remains as calm as before, because this too belongs to its continuity. We move on under a curtain of hanging leaves. Some are young and tender, lighter green even in the darkness. Others are older, thick and glossy, shedding water in large drops. The leaves make the air smell fresh where they are bruised or newly opened. That freshness floats above the darker peat scent, giving the night a layered breath. Leaf chemistry influences many relationships here. Some leaves are tough or bitter, discouraging herbivores. Others are tender and quickly eaten. When they fall, their compounds affect decomposition, water color, and nutrient release. The Blackwater's mood begins in leaf tissue, in the substances trees make for their own lives and then return to the swamp. You might picture a leaf's whole journey, from bud to broad green surface, from sunlight to shade, from branch to water, from floating form to soft brown fragment, from fragment to peat and dissolved color. This is one of the forest's slowest songs. It plays everywhere at once, so quietly that we notice it only when we choose to drift with it. A small insect chorus rises from the flooded margin, slightly brighter than before. The sound has a fine, shimmering quality, like threads drawn through warm air. It does not break the low mood. Instead, it fills the space between water and canopy. You can let it blur into the imagined sound of your own breathing, until forest and room feel closer together. The Borneo Blackwater swamp forest is far away for many listeners, yet its calm can be near. You do not have to stand in the swamp to feel the idea of warm darkness, wet leaves, and a slow channel. The mind is good at making quiet places when given enough sensory detail. Tonight, we are giving it roots, blackwater, peat, and hidden lives. A cluster of small fish moves through the reflection of the canopy, and the mirrored leaves shiver around them. They are almost invisible from above, but their motion breaks the illusion. The reflected forest reminds us that surfaces can hold whole worlds lightly. Beneath the surface, another world continues with its own needs and paths. This is true across the ecosystem. Beneath the canopy, understory. Beneath the understory, roots. Beneath roots, peat. Beneath water, leaf litter. Beneath visible behavior, adaptation. Beneath tonight's calm, ages of change. The Borneo Blackwater swamp forest invites us to notice one layer, then remember there is always another, softer and deeper. We drift beside a bank where a tree has leaned but not fallen. Its trunk angles over the water, and new growth has turned upward from its branches. The tree adjusted to its own tilt, finding vertical again in pieces. Moss grows along the upper side. Roots still hold somewhere in the dark ground. It is a quiet portrait of persistence. Leaning trees create shaded cover over channels. Their branches drop leaves directly into water. Their trunks provide roots for animals, and their eventual fall may reshape the bank. Even imbalance becomes habitat. The swamp does not require perfect uprightness. It uses whatever form, time, water, and growth have made. You can rest with that thought without making it sharp. The forest accepts angled trunks, broken branches, submerged roots, and fallen leaves. It does not need symmetry to be whole. The Borneo Blackwater swamp forest is whole because all its uneven pieces remain connected through water, decay, growth, and shelter. A patch of open water ahead reflects a faint star or planet through a gap in the canopy. It is small and blurred, trembling whenever the surface moves. For a while, it travels with us, not in the sky but in the channel, then leaves close overhead, and the reflection disappears. The loss is gentle. The darkness receives it without ceremony. Even when the sky is hidden, the swamp has its own faint points of attention. A droplet on a leaf, an eye glint near the bank, a pale fungus on wood, a fish scale turning. These are not stars, but they serve a similar restful purpose, giving the mind soft places to land within a larger dark. The Borneo Blackwater swamp forest remains close, humid, and alive around us. The water carries the smell of peat, the trees hold the night, and small creatures continue their patient work in every hidden place. We move forward without needing to arrive, following the narrow channel as it bends again under the leaves, where more roots wait in the darkness, and the forest keeps unfolding at its own slow-breathing pace. The bend carries us into a still pocket of water where the roots gather close, and the Borneo Blackwater swamp forest seems to hold its breath around us. The insect chorus has softened into a single warm veil. The frogs call less often now, or perhaps their voices have become part of the darkness, folded into the steady hush of leaves, peat, and water. You can let your attention settle on the surface, almost black, with only a faint brown glow where the hidden sky touches it. A leaf drifts beside us, heavy with rain, turning once before it rests against a root. Beneath it, the water is quiet. Beneath the water, the peat is quiet as still, holding fallen seasons in its dark, wet memory. Nothing here asks to be found all at once. The fish remain under leaves. The frogs rest near their small pools. The insects continue their fine work in bark, flower, and damp air. High above, sleeping animals are held by branches, while below them the forest floor becomes water, then root, then old leaf, then deep peat. Your breathing can slow with that layering. The room around you can soften as the swamp softens. The weight of your body can become like rain held in the ground, not falling anymore, not searching for anywhere else to go. In the Borneo Blackwater swamp forest, stillness is not empty. It is full, but it is full quietly. The last ripples move outward from a falling drop. They touch a root, bend around a floating leaf, and fade into the dark surface. The forest receives them without a sound. Warm air rests against the water. Wet bark holds the night. Far above, one hidden leaf releases one final bead of rain, and then everything settles. The Blackwater lies still among the roots, and now you are here with it, in the deep quiet of the forest, where nothing needs to move.